welcome back to Discover Meditation. My name is Alex Schubert, I'm your host, and today I'm very happy to be joined by Dr. Kristen, who is I don't know, how would you describe yourself?
I describe myself as a behavioral science professor and author. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. And I'm very excited to have Dr. Kristen with us today because we're going to be talking about all of these mindfulness and meditation concepts and how they can be integrated into stress relief, into your life, how you can benefit. And we talk a lot about the science behind meditation and mindfulness. And very happy to have somebody here who's really doing that work and really doing that research into it and sharing this with so many people. So we're going to have an exciting conversation about that. But first, we're going to start by slowing things down a little bit, and we're going to do a short breathing meditation. So, getting in mindfulness positions, getting in meditation positions. And we're going to start this meditation by getting in a comfortable, sustainable position. And we're going to start with a nice deep breath. In and out. Just noticing what it feels like to breathe. Connecting with the gentle in and out of your breath. Don't force it in any way. Breathing is something that happens without effort, without thought. Just bringing attention to your breath. Maybe noticing as it enters your nose or mouth. Becoming aware of the gentle rise and fall of your lungs, your chest, your abdomen. Being aware of your thoughts as they come and go. Just noticing, not judging them as good or bad. Not holding on to them or telling stories. Just watching them come and go. Always gently bringing your attention back to your breath. Back to the simple act of breathing. In and out. There's nowhere else you need to be. Nothing else you need to be doing. Just being here, now. Just as you are. Always bringing your thoughts, your attention back to your breath. And as we end this very short breathing meditation, always remembering And go back to it at any time. Go back to your breath. Back to any feelings of calm or peace you've cultivated. And even throughout the rest of this program, just reminding yourself to bring your attention back to this moment. And coming back to this room. So a very short meditation to start our conversation today, which is largely about stress. The irony of moving from peace to stress, but stress being such a big part of our lives, part of our days. I always like to talk about the fact that we need stress, and I was very delighted to find in your book, which we're going to talk about in a moment, that you talk a lot about how that stress is important, how we need that as the motivator, how without stress we don't actually live fulfilling lives. But at the same time, too much stress is not a good thing either.
That's right.
So maybe if you could just start by telling us why you got interested in spending so much time in your life talking about stress.
Absolutely. And thank you for that beautiful meditation. I think it's just what you said was so powerful, the idea that when we find that calm moment of solace, we can come back to it. And you're absolutely right about the frenetic pace of today and the inevitable nature of stress, right? I mean, and so many times what we hear about stress is that we can run away from it, we can squash it, we can solve it through pop psychology, a 5-step formula. And really all of my life's work has been about rethinking that. And it really came out of my own lived experience with anxiety and depression. It's something that runs in my family that I have a pregenetic disposition to.
Sure.
And so I always say there's kind of that two sides of it, that on one hand, the anxiety has kind of caused me to be a very motivated person. It's caused me to want to accomplish a lot and go after things. But on the other side, it's also had its destructive qualities, and it's given me a lot of difficult moments, even of personal burnout. So I've been working in the mental health field now for 22 years, and I've been teaching in higher education for 8 years. And again, I just believe so much in the power of how small things can make a big difference. So learning things like mindful practices and learning to understand, you know, the paradoxical nature of stress, that it has two different sides to it, and understanding, you know, things about our brains and our bodies and our whole health, how that can make such a big difference. And I know, like you know, we've had the clinical training, so we've gotten to learn so many skills that we can apply. And so that's really what I love to do, is share those kinds of skills that I've learned and I've seen be very powerful for those that I've served, and then in my own experience as well.
Yeah, and working with so many people who experience lots of stress. I mean, students, of course, are overloaded with stress. I can certainly remember, you know, the days of pursuing my master's and wondering, just looking back, I can't even imagine how I handled all of that. Of course, we adapt and we manage and we figure it out, but, you know, we did it. I mean, I think we benefit by being, you know, training as clinicians. I think we pick up some of those skills. I don't think everybody gets that opportunity. You know, we get that benefit of we're learning so we can teach it to others, but we get lucky that we get to learn it ourselves. And I think it's exciting to teach it to other people and to know that they're going to get those benefits that I think sometimes we take for granted. Right? Gee, isn't it obvious that you need to manage your stress?
That's
but it's not obvious.
That's right.
Some people almost revel in the stress. But don't realize that the damage it's causing.
That's right.
And so it really is, it's a great thing. And I'll go back to what you had mentioned earlier. I'll be completely honest, I was afraid at first that you were throwing out another 12-step, 10-step, 5 minutes to stress relief, and I was thrilled when I was reading your book that it's anything but.
That's right.
That it is, you know, really sound-based practices that intertwine. We were talking earlier about how this mindfulness, meditation, self-soothing, taking care of yourself is so intertwined in everything you write about, and how much you emphasize it really from beginning to end, which is great. So let's just quickly mention, we keep saying the book. So the book, Reset. So again, this is, I just read it myself, so I can definitely say it's great.
Thank you.
Was really thrilled with it, and wish I was doing groups right now, because I got to say I would use
Yes.
some of that in the groups right now, because it is just really practical. And I like, we were talking a little earlier about DBT, and
Yes.
I always like those. I think acronym's the wrong. No, acronym is the right word for it, right? Because it spells a word
Yes,
and you
yes.
can say it.
Yes.
I like the acronyms that you can remember, that you can, okay, gee, I need to do some reset right now, and
Yes.
it's telling you a whole bunch of information in just one phrase, and
Yes.
it's a nice way to go about. So I'm guessing you wouldn't be spending so much time with it if you didn't have a great reaction from people. What have you seen in people using this?
Well, and again, this was born out of my clinical practice, to the point you were saying that a lot of times we learn things and how do you transfer that knowledge so that everybody has access to it? And besides having a pet peeve of the 5-step kind of creepy pop psych stuff, I also think that a lot of the information that is available is too heady, it's too deep, and it doesn't make sense to everyday people who are already stressed enough. They don't have time to get into this deep theoretical lens. So with Reset, the Reset model was actually born out of my clinical work. So I was using a lot of dialectical behavioral therapy, also known as DBT, as you well know, and CBT, which is cognitive behavioral treatment. But also I'm really into brain science and really trying to understand applications, because when we think back to the good old days of Freud and his couch and the constructions we have about stress and human behavior, we're overturning those by the minute. And I often tell my students the example, I've actually had 2 ACL repairs. So I used to be a basketball player, and I've had my knee repaired a couple of times. So the first surgery I had was in 1992. 10 years later, the surgery that I had was very, very different because of all the breakthroughs in science and medicine. So one scar is like this, the other scar is like this, the recovery times were totally different. The same is true with psychology and human behavior and well-being. We're getting breaking news all the time about the way our brains work. And I think what holds a lot of people up is the stigma that people feel around stress and around anxiety and depression spectrum. I always say the biggest lie that anxiety can tell us is that we're the only ones. And in today's socio-political climate, in the hyper-competitive market, and just you're a parent, right?
Yep.
So I am as well. I have a beautiful 21-year-old daughter and a wonderful son who's 17. And so we're in it too. Not, I'm thinking about those I've served in therapy and in my classroom at Northeastern where I teach, but also just the frenetic pace. We have to do all, be all. We've got to be Kardashian. We've got to, all the pressures of today. And one of my students says it's like he's so sick of having to jump through all the hoops of today. So I think in general, a lot of times we think we're the only ones, but it's very much the modern dilemma of today. They're calling it the age of anxiety. So for me, Reset was born out of working with thousands of people over the years, and them bravely coming through the threshold of my therapy door and saying, I can't do this anymore. I need help. I'm getting physically sick from the stress. So Reset became a way in which a sticky way, like you said, where's your reset button? Or I need to reset, I need to recalibrate. So just the word alone, I think, really helps us. But then I really wanted to put in the best of today's science, the best of the rethinking we've done about how we frame mental health issues. And that's why even in my own story, I've gotten very brave. I get the chance to travel across the world and talk to lots of folks. And they see, you have appearances, they see your tie, they see you look well put together, they see me in a dress and they think you're a professional, you don't struggle with this. But I really think it's important that we all acknowledge that awake, alive, conscious people who are tuned in to what's going on, are going to experience some level of anxiety. It's just part of being human. And so we really need practical strategies that we can actually use. And I think mindfulness is the greatest, because I think a lot of people think they have to be, super Zen masters, or you've got to take 5 hours out of the day and get in that space. But I meditate when I'm walking the city. I meditate at different junctures during the day and just take those pauses, because as you can see, I'm a very hyperactive person. My brain goes, but I need to be able to take those moments to recalibrate. And I think it's just vital that, there's not a one-size-fits-all formula for it, but thinking about your own self, your own life, and where do you put things in that really help anchor you down, I think can be the make or break for any of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, we were talking again about the neuroscience piece, and I think it's so exciting, and there's so much of mindfulness research that's showing we can actually change the way our brain functions just by spending as little as 5 minutes of sitting and just being and breathing and focusing. We're changing these pathways. I mean, it's very exciting how so little can do so much.
That's right.
And yet it's ironic how much 5 minutes can sometimes feel like so much.
That's
right?
right.
I mean,
That's right.
there's many a client, I can't sit still for that long.
Yeah.
Of course it's difficult.
Right.
We have to acknowledge that it's difficult and accept that
Absolutely.
it's difficult,
Yes.
and that's okay
Yes.
that it's difficult.
I think if you asked me a few years ago, before I started to institute a lot of this in my own life, I would have run out the door. It was like my brain can't stop for 5 minutes. I couldn't even conceptualize it. But again, that's why they call it a practice, and it's introducing yourself to the ways that work for you. There isn't a one size fits all, and ultimately we know again about brain plasticity, that we can change our brain. And the other thing that I think so many of us think about, and this comes up, I'm sure, all the time in your work, and it comes up for me, is the whole phenomena of technology. And they're calling it now infobesity. And they're saying that we take in 171 newspapers a day, the equivalent of that information. So we're really saturated and overstimulated all the time. And I think even when it's not stressful content per se, or it's not this big deadline or big crisis, our brains are still always getting the message that something's wrong, just even in that sense of urgency that we face as people.
Well, it's very drama focused. You mentioned the Kardashians, and I don't know, every time I go in Huffington Post, it seems like there are 10 articles related to the Kardashians, and it is very drama focused. And it is a draw for us, and it's kind of interesting. I'm kind of thinking out loud right now of how that must be kind of driving that stress as well, right? We're stressed for these people who we'll never meet, we'll never see, and we're wrapped in their lives. And as if our own lives weren't stressful enough, let's seek out other people's stress to internalize.
And then there's obviously the social comparison that comes with that, and just kind of the Instagram standards of today, where people have to feel like they're more airbrushed and contrived than ever. And I think that there's a lot of that pressure of keeping up. And hence the name Keeping Up with the Kardashians, right?
Didn't even connect that, you're right.
But it's this whole subliminal message, right? But it's, at the end of the day, there's, I think, a lot that we're contending with, and then just the constant disruptions of the technology, and our brains just getting to the point where, none of us are robots, but we're almost being expected to operate as such. And we're kind of dividing our brain up into so many places that, the mindfulness really becomes just an antidote to that, a beautiful way to recalibrate and to come back to center, and to just give our brains the respite that they need, because our brains aren't designed to be robotic or be machines. I mean, we are incredible species. We're the only species as sapient creatures who are capable of what's called metacognition. So this is kind of a piece of my ongoing research and writing. And it's very much part of the reset model, but the awareness of our thinking and how that's actually driving and affecting our behavior. And we're the only species that's capable of that. And here we are so distracted and running around and not really getting to the marrow of what we could actually accomplish if we just didn't think we had to run around so much.
Yeah, mindfulness really gives us that time to contemplate at times.
Yes.
To slow down, to think about thinking is that kind of magical piece of us that is, it is amazing, and it is mindful, and it is part of practice. And it is great that we can do these things. I will take some deep breaths and relax while I'm driving a car. There's meditation while driving, while walking, while talking. I mean, just to be more aware. We've spent a whole show on just talking about being more aware in our relationships and connecting with each other.
Terrific.
And how we can use mindfulness to connect more. And to be more aware and to listen more.
Wonderful. So vital. I mean, we're at a time where people yell at each other for ratings and, just argue to win, not to learn.
Right.
And so that open mind and that open heart and that ability to be attentive and to be curious about one another, and even from that aesthetic beauty, just human beings, the wide tapestry we have of people, and just to appreciate people's stories and their essence and all that, I think sometimes just gets bullied over and barreled over in our world, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was thinking it might be fun to connect each of the reset pieces to mindfulness concepts.
Yes.
So let's start with just realizing.
Okay, sure.
So
sure.
first, just for those who haven't had a chance to read the book yet, what do you mean by realize?
So realize, in psychology, we call it perspective taking, or we call it appraisals, okay? And that's just, I love to think of the example of a movie, when a movie's being shot, and they do the first take, and then it's kind of messy, and then the second take gets better, and on and on. And so when we're hit with a dilemma, a problem, even a tragedy, our first signal, through the amygdala in our brain, which is just an almond-sized structure that regulates fear, is that this is it. This is a disaster. We're never going to recover. But what we know is human beings are incredibly resilient. And so realizing is about being able to step back and realize if you're in the middle of a crisis, if you're on a lack of sleep, if you're hangry, if all these triggers are happening, it might not necessarily be the best time for an in-depth analysis of your life. And what we know is when you come back to the second take or secondary appraisal, that's the time when you have greater access to your resources. And when I say that, I just mean that we can then think about ourselves, are we funny? Do we have a great sense of humor? Have we encountered this kind of problem before? How do we go about solving it? Are we really super analytical, or are we really creative? So we have internal resources. Then we also have external resources. We have one another to share our stories with, to understand, again, how people that we maybe admire or respect have solved the similar problems or gone through similar stages. Think of parenting even, right? Think of the things you're going through right now at this juncture with your children. And I think about what I'm going through. My children are mostly adults now, but it's all these different developmental stages of life, and knowing we have access to information about what's normal at those stages and the things that we could do that help with all of it. So realizing is knowing that when we're whipped up, when our amygdala is really tripped up, it's not the best time to reason. And the secondary appraisal is the time when we have more access to the frontal lobe. And where that connects with mindfulness is, we know when we do mindful and contemplative practices, that helps us develop our brains in new ways and to get to more of that reasoning part of ourselves.
Yeah,
So-
less reactivity.
Right, so it's really, really a vital process to allow ourselves to kind of slow down and take pause and not try to figure it all out when we're stuck or we're really overstimulated.
So I'm torn here. We're time-wise, we're actually near the end.
Okay.
It's really unfortunate because I would love to spend at least another hour talking about this
Yeah,
with
yeah.
you.
Same here.
So let's maybe tie it all together.
Okay.
So as much as I hate to stress ourselves out by squishing all this in,
Yeah.
how would you like to wrap up reset and mindfulness and all of that the work that you're doing with this? What do you think?
I think this has just been such a lovely conversation. I agree. We could go on for a long time, but I think for everybody that's taking the time to listen, I think it's just really important to know that reset is really a way to engage in self-care. And self-care is a fancy way of saying we're attentive, which is what mindfulness is. We're attentive to our whole health needs, our mind, our body, our spirit. And we're not just running around in this frenetic mode, or I think for a lot of people I've served, and I'm sure for you, they take care of everybody but themselves. And that's actually very common in our professions, for teachers, helping professions, clinicians, physicians, nurses, parents. We often run around. So I love the airplane metaphor, put your mask on first.
Yes, I like that in the book there.
It's just
yes,
a
I hadn't
great-
heard that metaphor before.
It's a great way to think about it. And it feels counterintuitive. You think, gee, if the plane was going down, I'd be helping everybody.
Yeah.
But I think it's very important that we engage in a deliberate process of self-care. Again, by 2030, the World Health Organization is saying that lifestyle sickness is going to trump communicable disease, which means we used to be scared of catching illness. Now we're afraid we're going to get sick because of stress-related illness. So deliberate self-care is really important. It's not just an indulgence. I think a lot of times across generation we think that way, or we think if we're experiencing disruptions, there's something wrong with us. But prevention is less costly than repair. So Reset really teaches every person to think about their own life circumstances and then really put a plan in action. I'm using this across agencies and organizations, and I work with a lot of places to put Reset, whether it's corporations or schools. And I'm using it in my classroom at Northeastern to teach students because of the college mental health crisis. So, you know, I encourage everyone to connect with me. I'm available on social media at The Real Dr. Kris, K-R-I-S. I have a website, KristenLee.com, and you can find more information about Reset there. And then I write wildly in the Huffington Post.
That's right.
And in Psychology
I did
Today.
see
So I've
that,
got tons of articles there for parents, for people in the field, for anybody that wants to learn more about mindful practices and self-care. Because, you know, again, as someone who has experienced mental health issues, as someone who has worked to prevent and treat them, I think, back to our original point, the more you know, the more curious, the more open-minded, the more you take care of your mind and body, the better equipped you are to feel well and to be well.
Absolutely.
So I welcome people to get in touch with me. I love to share my work, and I love to share these ideas.
Great. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to share with me and with the audience here.
My pleasure.
And I do recommend to all of you to pick up the book, give it a read. It's even as a mental health practitioner who teaches a lot of these skills, I found a lot of things in there that I really connected with and enjoyed too. So again, thanks again for coming on.
My pleasure.
And let's just end with a quick moment of mindfulness practice ourselves. And again, getting in that mindfulness position where you can sit comfortably and relax. And take a nice deep breath. And slowly letting it out. And for this moment, we're going to do a particularly short loving kindness, a metta meditation. Just by connecting with ourselves and saying some phrases of kindness, repeating the following phrases to yourself. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I feel peace. May I be safe. Just allowing yourself to connect with feelings of kindness and compassion towards yourself. Giving yourself permission to take care of yourself, to soothe yourself when you need it, when you feel stress or discomfort. Taking care of yourself much as you would someone else, a loved one or a friend. Treating yourself with that same kindness and compassion. And seeing if you can hold on to that feeling of kindness that you've cultivated for yourself as you go throughout your day. And I want to thank you for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you again in future episodes. Thank you, and again, be kind to yourself.